feedback that the community didn't trust the council. So when we put the CSP together, Community Strategic Plan together, we had things in it like being a leading organisation, building a reputation for integrity, due diligence, transparency, foresight and fair play. Sounds terribly British, fair play. Anyway, so we had, the important thing about trying to get feedback on that kind of thing and seeing whether you've got change over time is keeping the, having a baseline and then keeping the questions stable over a number of years so you can see the change. So, we put things in about transparent and accountable council activities and opportunities to participate in council decision making. And unfortunately myself and Marina left quite soon after we'd put all of the integrated planning and reporting together. And I think the problem was that the council didn't then keep it stable in terms of asking the questions and being able to look at trends. That first year when we did it, it got worse rather than better. But it's a bit like community safety. Community safety can get worse rather than better because you're actually encouraging people to report crime. So, when you start to talk to people about engaging with the council and the council engaging with the community, it can result in more dissatisfaction, and you have to take a long-term view over the evaluation. So that's one of my points about having a long-term view. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about an experience of mine in England, and to me this is the ultimate in Shangri-La community engagement because I was living in Lincoln and they... Oh, okay, somebody else.
Just wanted to do a shout out.
Yeah, great place. And I was on the community panel, and so this community panel had 300 people on it, geographically and demographically, representative, blah, blah, blah. And the council engaged with those people in a number of different ways. And every year 100 of those people fell off and a new 100 came on. I went to a meeting where the leader of the council, which is like our mayors, did the presentation about the budget, and did we all agree with the budget? The increase in rates. And in England, the increase in rates is like, really tiny because the national government has control over the finances, how unusual. And so everyone agreed. And then they had a bit of time left over, and so the leader said, "Oh, has anybody got any questions?" And this guy stood up and went, "The car parking in this town is crap." And 200 people went, "Ooh, he must be a new guy." And he went, "Oh my God, what have I said? I've got 200 people sort of trying to shout me down." And a lot of other people in the room stood up and started going, no, we need integrated ticketing, we need park and ride. And the leader of the council said to him, "So, what do you want us to knock down to make car parks available in Lincoln? Would it be the 10th century cathedral? Or maybe the 11th century castle? Or your place of work, maybe? Which would you like us to knock down so that you can have car parking?" And the rest of the audience all came in and went, "No, we have to find solutions. The number of cars in the UK is doubling every 10 years and we have to work on these complex problems together to find solutions." And that's my ultimate in evaluation of community engagement, that you get people on board to help you with those kind of complex issues.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's amazing when people go on that sort of journey and you find out that, in fact, some of those very typical voices are met with others that said, "Actually, we've thought this one through. We've been on a journey. We're at a different place now." So that's something about closing the loop, is about the capacity and the insights that a community of interest develop over a time when they've been authentically engaged. So, amazing story. Okay, we've got some stuff here. I'm going to see if the volume's right. Our technical person's gone, but let's just see what happens. This is, I think the first one's yours, Anne. So we'll have a look at this little video. Volume's all right? Yeah.
Welcome to an overview of the journey that North East Water and our customers have been on in the development of our price submission. In the first for us, we added the delivery forum. This was a particularly powerful process that really stretched our thinking. One of the areas was in the length of the regulatory period, where at the outset we thought we were preparing a 5-year price submission, and we're now proposing an 8-year price submission in response to our customers. Let's have a look at how we did it.
Your Water, Your Say aims to reach as many people as possible.
We set up information kiosks in the main streets of towns right across North East Victoria. We met with the region's young people in several focus groups. We got together with residential customers at forums in Wodonga, Benalla, Wangaratta, Porpunka and Corryong. We met with our commercial customers and held an industrial customer roundtable. A group of the region's property developers participated in a forum. We engaged with a group of traditional owners, and we established a stakeholder reference group comprised of representatives from the 7 councils in our region, as well as the Catchment Management Authority. This widespread engagement really helped us understand the expectations of our customers and communities.
I found a lot of information that I wasn't particularly aware of beforehand, such as the limitations you put on yourself for getting jobs done, answering phones, some of the smaller things, but large ones that concern the community. And it came over as a very caring group, actually, which was rather nice.
There's lots of people which are interested in the water issues, and some really good comments that came out of tonight that I think will be valuable for North East Water to use, to take back and to consider.
We also held a deliberative forum involving over 30 people who broadly represented our service region. We used an independent facilitator to ensure the integrity of the process. Participants were also independently recruited to form a diverse group of varying ages and education levels. The forum met over 6 days and heard from our staff and other experts on a range of topics including tariffs, customer communications, innovation and climate change. The forum enabled our customers to develop a set of proposals and deliberate on the trade-offs, priorities and pricing. The board accepted 82 of the 88 proposals delivered by the forum.
We've got old, young, middle-aged, different cultures, different backgrounds, and I believe that gives a real good overall perception of what the community is.
I hadn't realised how intense the forum would be, and the onus and responsibility for us to put forward all our positive ideas.
Being someone young, it makes me think of my health and also how much water I'm using at home, and bottled water is not the best option.
I think the value also comes through the engagement process, because what I've heard is that people are going home, they're telling their neighbours, they're telling their family about what's going on, and what they found through the education process was they're pretty happy with what North East Water are doing already.
So what have we done with this engagement information? We have created our 8-year price submission. During this period, the plan highlights the customer preference that we invest in more community education about water and a changing climate. It also focuses on improving our customers' experience through increased use of digital technology. $146 million will be spent on capital projects, including major investments in renewable energy to help us reduce carbon emissions and lower our energy costs. We will deliver $341 million of operational activities during the 8 years, and our charges will be kept as affordable as possible, with the average residential water bill to increase by just $5 a year.
We'd like to thank everyone who contributed to Your Water, Your Say. Customer and community input is really critical to our planning, so thank you for your contribution. If you'd like more information about our customer engagement program or about our price submission, please visit our North East Water website.
Actually, I'll take it off you then. I've got a question for you. So, fairly comprehensive process. I'm interested in the angle about closing the loop and what North East Water has done as far as reporting back about the level of... Let's keep going. We just thought you would like to see it again, that's all. So I'm curious about the whole story, and it was a thrill working with you on that, and Jacinta, who also worked on that. But the whole story about getting commitment to the process and how you've been able to report that back to the community that's participated, I guess I'll be really interested in your comments about that.
Sure, and it was fun working with Jacinta and with you, Max. And
Brad, Jacinta's a lot of fun, I'm bored.
Not yet. And Brad, sitting down the back of the room, is our Manager of Customer Engagement and Communications and was responsible for a lot of the great work. And the report back was really done in the same way that we did the initial consultation in stage 2 of the project, where we went around and we held focus groups and we held workshops and we went and met with people in coffee shops and hotels and God knows where, everywhere, and had those conversations with our commercial customers, our industrial customers, our developers, our community groups from across the region. So we went back saying, this is what you told us, this is what we put to the board, this is what the board said in response to that, this is what our result is of the 88 proposals. We went through each proposal with them. This is what the proposal was, this is what the board said in response. And, you know, I think the board didn't accept 6 of them. They modified slightly 15 proposals, and the rest were accepted verbatim as we reported them back. So the people who had participated in the initial engagement were really thrilled about that. They felt that they had been heard and that they'd had a really genuine opportunity to contribute to the decision making. And we were really proud of the fact that we got a 93% satisfaction rate with the engagement process. So it was a real milestone for us, but I think it was as much a milestone for the community, because the communities in our region, we're a very rural region in northeast Victoria, and our communities weren't used to being engaged like that either. So it was a great learning experience for us, but also for the communities. So I'm sure they'll have very high expectations next time.
Yes, even higher for sure. Thanks, Anne. One last question. Did you find some responses that I've encountered various times over the last 20 years or so, that when actually people have contributed to something and they can see the outcome, the influence, and how it's been used, that they kind of go into shock, that it's actually led to some real tangible changes. What were some of the reactions you got when you're able to let people know very transparently what came in and what you did with it and what decisions have been made?
Well, I think you're right. I think there was certainly a level of surprise, at least, from a lot of people in the responses back. But we do have to temper that because of the price submission process, we're not able to guarantee that all of those things are going to happen. We're in that kind of bureaucratic situation that was being referred to earlier this morning, where we've put our price submission forward to the Essential Services Commission, and they now hold it, and we're now waiting for their feedback, and they will make a determination as to what our service levels will be and what our prices will be, based on whether they think we've got it right and we have genuinely got that information from our customers. So we're in that kind of holding period at the moment, and once we get that determination, then we'll be able to be more factual about what the outcome is. But I think even so, even though we're in that transition stage, the people that we have engaged with and gone back to have been really pleased about being heard.
At least you've been accountable back about how North East Water has used their input, and now, even though that now goes to the Central Services Commission, they've been able to influence the work that you've done. I think that, there's clarity around that. Pass it on to Amanda. I'm going to get up Sam's video in a moment. The question, I'm keen to hear from Amanda, who has been working in this space for a long time and could see an opportunity, I guess, to really ramp up how we go about evaluating this practice. I know it's been a real passion of yours. So what have you learned about engaging, and what's your mission?
I've been engaging for a while, as you know. I've been an IAP2 trainer since 2006, I think.
Sorry. That was a mistake. I just thought your talk would go better with music.
Yeah, that's right. Excellent. So I've been a trainer since 2006, and I must say, the thing that everyone grapples with, and they say over and over and over again, is we'd really love to do evaluation, but we can't do it. We move on to the next project, there's no funding for it, there's no tool, and so eventually I just thought, I may as well do it, and I made a promise to my beautiful staff that I would do it in that financial year, and it got to the last week of June, and I was on holidays, and I went, oh, bugger, and so I did it. So we've been working on it just over a year. So that's the personal story. The industry story is one of a few unique things that have happened. And if you think about the different jurisdictions, this will help to explain it. So in New South Wales at the moment with the Planning Act, it's out for consultation. It includes a requirement to evaluate. The Auditor General here in Victoria, I think in July, issued a report which talked to how well government agencies evaluating their engagement processes. In Queensland, the new Planning Act, the ministerial guidelines actually require engagement and require it to be evaluated. So I actually worked on that one. I didn't, to be honest with you, I did not understand the implications of what we wrote because those in the planning and legal world have said it's a toolkit, but actually it's in effect, because it's ministerial guideline, is mandated. So all of those things have come into play, and IAP2 has finished an amazing piece of work, the Quality Assurance Standards. So if you haven't read them, I would urge you to do it. There's been some really fabulous practitioners who have spent a lot of time working on that. Leanne, I know you've spent a lot of time on that as well. So that's really why it's been dubbed a passion project. Last year at conference we ran a workshop. We actually asked engagement practitioners to tell us what they wanted in the process, and we built a platform, a software platform. As a former judge of awards, I really grappled with the problem that very few people evaluated, and in fact as we judged awards it was really problematic for me personally to compare a wonderful one, I think you worked on Max, with an enormous, which won an award, but not because it was you, it was just a great process, which had an enormous budget and a really wide brief compared to something very small of a very different nature. So I struggled with that. And so for me, evaluation is a number of things. It's evaluating what stakeholders and communities feel about the process, linked to the core values, which I still think are the best thing to judge good practice, Net Promoter Score, and what worked well and what didn't. But actually triangulating that with understanding the value that engagement had to the project. So for the project people to be able to have a voice to say, actually through the engagement I saved time, I saved money, I learned new things, I created efficiencies, I left a legacy, whatever they come up with, a list of benefits. And then also the engagement team. And so if you get that really full triangulated picture, you can evaluate it. And then having ready-made questions that form what will form eventually benchmarks for different sectors and different types of practice. So deliberative practice versus if you think about our infrastructure people who've spoken this morning, where they've got very few negotiables. It's a very different process, I think, evaluating that, where you're operating a consultative form versus empower and collaborate. So there's quite a lot of thinking that's gone through. So that's where it's at. We're at a working beta, and so we've got some wonderful people who are ready to trial that on projects. It's, I think for me, it's around the maturation of the sector, and as we sit alongside in boardrooms with our professional colleagues who are engineers and accountants and project managers, we have to be, we have to meet KPIs, and we have to report on how we're spending public money, and that I think will only be a good thing. And that the evaluation piece is part of feeding back internally as well as back to the community.
I know that with that passion, Amanda, I reckon people here would have relate to these questions we hear all the time. One is, how do we know this process is going to be any good that's being proposed or that's being developed? And the other question is, how do we know that it wasn't any good?
That's right.
How can we have confidence? And we're talking about that whole relationship with decision makers, politicians. What would give them confidence that the process was robust, was substantial? I kind of guess this is your contribution to the industries around trying to get better and more systematic in how we do that.
Yeah. And look, it started as a thing I thought we just needed as a profession, then it moved on to this promise. I'm good at keeping promises, damn it. But actually then it is so, I think it will be such a profound thing to do. I don't know actually what the answers will be for projects. So I don't know what the average will be across a Leichhardt scale. No idea. I don't know which industry will perform better. I don't know which core values we're meeting any better than others. We should be able to have hard evidence around if you do engagement early, it works better, types of questions. I don't know all those answers. I don't think anyone actually does. Having done literature reviews for IAP2 for complex engagement, of which was that high, the paperwork, there are actually no answers. So I'm thinking of it as an action research project.
I think what we've learned is that it's not necessarily having the answers, it's being able to ask good questions. And I think there's a lot to be learned in the sector. And as you say, maturation of the sector, so that's brilliant. All right, can you do? I'm going to show Sam's video. I'm a bit concerned I couldn't hear volume. So if there's no volume, could someone go out there and crash tackle a
I mean, you just need to turn it up on the actual screen down the bottom there, Max. Yeah. I might, Max, before you hit play, I might maybe just explain in a minute the project, which might make the video might make a bit more sense. So, yes, as Max alluded to, I'm more of a project manager, not an engagement specialist. So I lead a team of engineers, planners, and engagement and people. And the project, the video we'll talk about is based in Ballarat. So my team is based in Ballarat. So looking around the CBD, so for some transformational transportation network changes. For those who know Ballarat, obviously based on the gold mining era, has developed over the years, but in the last sort of 50 years has not changed too much land use and transport wise. The city's reached 100,000 and is projected to double in the next 15 years. So we need to cope with that now and going forward. So Mayor and Sturt Streets are some of our core streets in our CBD. Mayor Street's effectively an unutilised street that's been the same for 100 years. And Sturt Street, for those who know Ballarat, is the Grand Boulevard. So we knew before we even wanted to tackle it, and discussion around these roads has been kicking on for 20 years, but it was always too hard to tackle. We said, well, we need to tackle it. We need some direction from the community. We had strategic direction in terms of road safety from council wanting to change the land use. We didn't have a feel from community about how they wanted the road space to look and to operate. So we started going down the, I guess, traditional path. We had stakeholder groups, we had reference groups, but particularly in a regional setting, you do get the same faces, the same stakeholders turning up, telling you the same thing every time. We said we need fresh injection of ideas, or even just to confirm the path we are going down is correct. So we went down a modified citizens jury path. And I think most of the speakers that you'll hear on the video were on that group and are sort of responding post our session.
Let's go for it.
For about 2 years, we've got some great ideas from the community conversations that led to Ballarat's CBD strategy. We also talked to local businesses and community groups and learnt a lot from the parking survey completed by the City of Ballarat. 900 people told us how they wanted to improve traffic flow, pedestrian access, cycling and parking in our online survey.
I was really happy to complete the survey because I think it's really important that you have a point of view and you can get to have your say about your own local community.
As a business person in this area, you sort of wonder, well, how can we improve on this?
With the school run, it does get quite heavy out here, and with our business, we have delivery vehicles running around town all day.
We asked a citizens advisory group to help with the tricky issues.
There were young married people, there were singles, there were unemployed people, there were business people there.
There was someone representing cyclists. There was someone with mobility issues that had a lot more trouble getting around, and that was really important to hear from everyone.
Having your eyes open from different pedestrian experiences, different driver experiences.
I've been involved from the day dot since I got the first invite and staying on top of what's happening.
Generally speaking, I think the entire group really were wanting the best outcome.
There was a lot of time given for participants to actually state their point of view.
We actually went out of the building and they took us around the streets of Ballarat.
On the second day after we'd had all the information, people were far more
parking away from where they were needing to shop and walking in fact, enabled them to browse and look at other stuff.
From these conversations and surveys, we've put together concepts for Mayor and Sturt Streets. We think we've struck a balance between Ballarat's great lifestyle, heritage and future prosperity.
The concepts, the drawings and stuff seem to be what we did discuss. And so that to me is positive that, they took notice of us, they thought what we presented was a good idea.
I have been involved in these similar situations before. Generally walk away a little cynical, but I do have that taste of cynicism following this process.
We were given so much information, background information, before we came to any decisions or recommendations, that we were able to make an informed decision.
These are our two main streets for our city and they will have a big impact on everyone in our community.
I personally found the days very invigorating.
City of Ballarat in this case deserve to be congratulated for actually undertaking this process.
Have your say on how we can keep Ballarat moving.
So we had to cut out the bits about they talked about the facilitators being really good looking and all that sort of stuff back there. Unfortunately, we had to cut that bit out. I guess while I've got the mic, I might sort of throw in, my thoughts on closing the loop and probably more from a project manager's point of view rather than a detailed practitioner's point of view. So for VicRoads, for those in this stage of interact with VicRoads, we're trying to push ourselves out there more into the community space and particularly different platforms and different techniques. So for our office and this team, this sort of deliberative process was brand new to us. So in terms of closing the loop, we need to, and I think we've just alluded to, say, how robust was the process? Did we actually achieve what we set out to achieve? Are there measurable ways to say, yes, we saved ourselves time and money? And I know VicRoads is starting to work on some of those data sets now, and I can, because I'm the one who has to do it, reduce the amount of briefs to ministers, responses to editorials in the local paper. I think they can be measurable. And I guess from a project manager's point of view to this group, I challenge you to say, you do need to have that robustness and that story behind your processes, because as a project manager, I'm going to come to you as practitioner and say, we've got this project or program, we'll explore the context, but I want to know what tools and techniques I have available to me to deploy, and of course they'll be tailored to the particular community or city or program that you're running. But I need those tools, and usually in big infrastructure projects, funding is consideration, but I'm quite prepared to quickly do a social media post or a mail out that is an absolute drop in the bucket compared to bridges and roads. And if that reduces my risk and I can go into the minister's office and say, oh look, I've got really good community buy-in. Yes, you'll still get a couple of cranky people on the radio or on the front of the newspaper, but they're in the minority, and we've addressed the majority concerns. I can take that tool, I can justify that tool, I can take it to government in VicRoads' case, and in private industry obviously to boards and other funding mechanisms. So yeah, I say to this group, the closing the loop is important, not only from a project point of view, so we obviously close the loop with the group members involved and the community, but as a process or a robustness, we need that as just to confirm that tool is useful and we can deploy it later on.
Keep the mic just for a sec. One of the things that you did, and I know that Anne did North East Ward, is, which I think is good practice, was actually bringing those deliberative forums back with the invitation to come back and you reporting back about what you've done with the stuff. And to me that seems like an incredibly sensible and powerful thing to do, just to say, look, we weren't actually mucking around, you really did help us, this is how you helped us come up with a good solution, we believe. And that seemed to be, so I think you should be congratulated for taking that step, because I think that's part of building confidence in process, and we know how hard it is if you're working with a cynical community. And Ballarat was a very cynical community, I'd have to say. Would you agree?
Yes. It's a city that's trying to go. It's got an identity crisis, and some people still think it's a country town. Other people think it's a city. So this road discussion sort of brought that to the head for many people. Look, in terms of the output of the session, we probably feedback for ourselves is we tried to tackle too much in terms of working through the community around, like we were working down to the centimetre, saying how wide do you want the bike path, do you want trees here, these sort of facilities. In the end, at the end of the 2 days, we're able to take away some themes that the community were after, their priority themes and where the low and high and medium priorities were. So that feedback mechanism was probably even more important because they left us with themes saying we want 2 lanes of traffic, we want street trees, we want bicycle paths. They did entrust us through the process to say we trust VicRoads to come up with the safest design and the design that meets our themes. So again, actually physically showing them those designs and explaining how we've incorporated or where we couldn't, and there's some places we could incorporate their themes. That was a critical part to really closing the loop for those group, but also then be able to basically practice explaining it to the broader community as well.
Fantastic. I'm sure there's going to be some questions here. I know I've got a heap myself. Are anyone sort of using the bot thing for some questions here? That's good because I haven't been looking at it, but I might actually go to you and ask you. How many people have got a question you'd love to throw at the group? It's terrific. I've got 3 to start with. Okay, so Susan, nice big voice.
Oh, and I'm just wondering, when you went back to those community groups to provide that feedback, did you formally reconvene meetings with them? How did you touch base with them again?
Yeah, we did. We had all their contact information, so we got back in touch and set up meetings and got them all back in the same room and had the conversation about the list of proposals. And the thing that I neglected to mention before was when we got the deliberative forum back together, our board chair came in and met with the forum. In fact, a lot of the board members were there on that day as well. And the board chair, who, we're really fortunate because we've got an outstanding chair who's a wonderful person and really deeply genuine and really deeply committed to listening to customers. So he stood up at the front of the room and talked to the proposals to the members of the forum in a way that was really powerful for us as the people who had been involved in the work, but it was equally powerful for the forum participants to hear their thoughts reflected back from the chair. It didn't come back just from a staff member like me or Brad, it came from our chair who really represents the minister in that situation. And so they had a great experience of that. And it was great for the board as well because they were able to talk with the participants at that point and really get to more deeply understand the detail around their preferences that they had expressed during the conversations and deliberations. And so it was very rewarding for the board members, for the directors to know that they had actually empowered people to make decisions.
And probably the groups were very, very appreciative that the board made that effort.
Yes,
to stand up in front of them and so there.
Yeah. Yes,
absolutely. Thank you. So, question. Oh, sorry, I can't see your name, but tell us who you are.
I'm Rachel Fox from RPS. I think it's really great to hearing how you close the loop with people who participate in the engagement. How about closing the loop with the outputs of that engagement to other communities and feeding back to people who haven't been involved in that engagement? When you say Ballarat was a cynical town, you persuaded a bunch of people that you were meeting business. How did that output affect all the other cynics in the town? Were you able to close the loop with them?
I didn't worry about them, I'm way too hard.
It's a good point. So the technicalities of after we had produced our concepts based on the sessions with the community group, we actually the videos online, but also set up a pop-up shop in the CBD of town. And the very first session we had was to bring those community group members back. They sort of confirmed to us, yes, no, you interpreted what we wanted fairly well. And then it was obviously formal hope is that those people in the community advocates for the project and the process and the outcome through their community. But in Ballarat, there's some history there with consultation with council and probably VicRoads previously on project. It was we hadn't just rammed the design down their throat the week before and said we're going to go and bulldoze through and build this. We've actually spent time, effort, resources, listening to, coming up with a process. To some degree, the town was aware that there was so many demands that we weren't able to achieve them all. So I think to some degree I was explaining where we'd able to make our wins, where the compromises were and what the non-negotiables were. So, and that's probably where some evaluation is still lacking in terms of we can evaluate that core group that we had and say, hey, we had 95% people loved the process and thought the outcome was great. But how you capture that output in a broader community to say we recognise that process as a good way of going, even if we weren't involved, or we empower our other community members to make decisions on our behalf. I think there's still a gap there, so we're still going on a bit of a gut feel of reaction to the outputs rather than a probably more scientific approach.
Okay.
I'm just going to share a client. It's actually they're one of my favourites, Cairns City Council. They've done the most amazing thing. I did not know until just recently. They did a big Our Cairns process to develop a corporate plan for 5 years. Huge process. And did all the normal feedback, thanking people, all of that stuff that you would expect a good process would do. But I ran into a councillor and she said that it's had such an enormous difference to the way in which they run their council and their governance structure, that every time they have a policy document that is proposed to council, they prepare the brief and the proposal, and on the bottom of that, they draw a specific link from the Our Cairns engagement process to how it has informed the policy that's being put forward to councillors. Then as the councils adopt it, in what they report back on, they then draw the line from that engagement process. And that's an ongoing thing. So I was quite impressed by what council did, because they didn't just listen, they didn't just report back, but they've actually integrated the findings into everything they do at the most
ongoing
profound
reference
level.
for any decisions and policy, a bit similar to the Queensland Government with the Queensland Plan, that they legislated the work of the engagement process, and so that all other plans have to reference that plan, which is kind of a cool way to kind of keep it as a living piece of work, and local government would be even more specific.
On the Lincoln example that I used, so they had 300 people that were demographically and geographically representative, but when they called them to meetings, they actually let them bring their friends and family with them, because people don't like to turn up at meetings, and so it didn't really matter all that much in a meeting, how representative they were, just that a lot of people came, if you see what I mean. So that was very good in that it wasn't only 300 people at a time. It was, and then 100 dropped off and another 100 came on. It was actually influencing a lot more people than that. So it was more than that, and that was a statistically representative sample. But then the other thing about seeing what the evaluation overall is, going back to what I was saying about community satisfaction surveys and then testing it all the time about how much you're gradually making that change across the wider community. When you do the community satisfaction surveys about, do they increasingly feel that the council can be trusted, is going out and talking to the community. So, you can then test it from a wider angle through a satisfaction survey that's, again, representative.
Thanks, Amanda. I think one of the challenges we have as a sector, to be fair to say, is about we're getting better at going deep, doing the deep dive, doing the delivery thing, and we love that, and it's very satisfying, but how do we also go broad and do that better? And how do you then actually have this iterative process about going broad and going deep and learning to do that? I think that's kind of where we're experimenting all the time and learning to be creative. So I think that's a really good point that you made about that. Now, I know Georgie had a question.
Actually, she got my question.
Okay, I'll go to Mandy. That was your question too?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Oh, you got a question. Leanne.
So,
I'm just wondering what you do or what strategies you put in place when people aren't ready or don't want to close the loop. So often in local government, the decision's been taken, but the community still have their website, they're still online, they're still lobbying parliamentarians. Love to hear your ideas.
You might like to repeat the question just in case I can hear the back. It's okay.
Yeah, look, I mean, that is one of the big difficulties, and I mentioned at the beginning about being a change agent and not necessarily always being applauded for it. So, for example, at Rockdale, I felt that we did some good work in terms of feedback to the community, but I felt then that we weren't allowed to put that report to council in terms of what it was all about. So you often do bump into the powers that be not letting you actually go about closing the loop entirely in the way that you'd like to, even though it was part of the strategy that they did originally approve. So you can, come up against those things. When I've come up against, the mayor and the general manager not wanting to use or not wanting to acknowledge feedback, etc., we used online, have your say. So we would put feedback on there, but it's not kind of as good as it should be. And a lot of the time you do struggle against the powers that be if they don't like the feedback they're getting.
This is more about the community, not being ready or willing to close and end it, I guess.
I love that question. Because I reckon you're always going to have people in that position, and it's, this better than anyone really. It's that journey, and so the context of the life they live in will change, and then we have to revisit what we've done. I think that's that bit around that broad process. I like to think of it as the eye. You have a picture, so really, really broad, then go really, really deep, and then go back broad again in some way. There's all these theories around, is it T-shaped, is it L-shaped? I don't know, it just helps us do pretty pictures on the board, really. But being able to have that broad conversation, just now they've got cans on the brain. When I say really large, it's a population of 160,000, so it'll be smaller than Ballarat soon. But 9,500 people contributed, so it's phenomenally large. When we got to the deliberative forums, it was very hard for those vested interest people to argue with what had been said, to the point where, and this is all on the public record, I mean, they're honestly the most amazing council, but the shift in priorities of what they wanted from an economic base, it was a big shift over a 10-year period, and those vested interests were pretty upset in one of the forums, really upset, because it was about their livelihood. And so, but the group said, hey, remember, it's 9,500 people from a base of 160,000 people have told you this is what they want. They haven't said your industry is not important, but they've said they're after a shift in diversification. And so, that bit around going broad, you'll still, as you know, you'll always have people who are going to reject that, and they might be ready to have the feedback to them because it doesn't suit their way. But it makes more sense to them.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Thanks. I think the other thing that brings to mind for me, Leanne, is the outrage, management techniques of just going back and listening and letting people vent and asking them what's it going to take, for you to feel satisfied that there's an outcome that you can live with, and being just really continually aware of the interests that are the deep-seated interests of the people that you're working with. And, sometimes it just has to be a waiting game to see who's going to get tired of this conversation first. Sometimes it takes a while for people to let go of their anger or their frustration or whatever, and we just have to be really, really patient to enable people to do that.
It's interesting about being principles-led rather than just being technique-driven. There's no magic technique, magic behaviours if you've done your IAP2 training. It's a really important element of it. There's a question at the back, but just while we're on this thing about looking at broad and deep, I just wonder how important it is having some videos of having citizens who went on the journey talking about their experience and what they learned. And I noticed that some of the Mosaic Lab do a great job, Kimbra, with your deliberative processes, having participants talk about what we learned. I came in thinking this, and then I walked the streets and I put on something that meant that I was vision impaired, and I realised how friggin' dangerous it is walking around Mayor Street in Ballarat. And so the journey they go on and recording those comments seems to be increasingly a way of trying to share the story that people go on when they deliberate and weigh things up and appreciate complex issues. So that's how important do you think those snippets are? And obviously you invested in them for a reason, not just to show at a conference, but it's partly about accountability and telling the story to the broader community. Important?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really important, you know, to, even if it's just from a perspective of promoting engagement as a practice. I think there are a whole range of benefits. And just on the thing about going broad and deep, I think the other thing that's really critically important in that is going early, so that we're going well before decisions are made or options are developed, and making sure that the people that we're working with are able to contribute to the development of the options at that early stage. Yeah. So early, broad and deep.
Yeah, that's good. Early, broad and deep. I like it. Okay, can you shut the back?
I'm tweeting that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Teresa from Auckland Transport. So we do a load of those consultations, roughly about 200 a year, and a lot of them around cycleways, which are incredibly divisive. And you have the cycling lobby who love cycleways and champion you, and shop owners who realise you're going to take up parking and that's going to despise you. So we'll do a consultation, we'll get all our feedback, and we'll feedback to our community. And then about a year later, we'll turn up and start putting spades in the ground. And that's going to be a whole lot of pushback. The customers going, you never asked me, I never fed back, I never agreed with the feedback. I just kind of wanted to get some insights on what you guys do in that kind of situation.
We're going to have to wrap up in about 15 seconds. Who's got a snappy answer? Sam.
Because it's transport, right? I'll have to go. For the ones we've done for Ballarat, we obviously went very broad, so we went randomly selected members for the group. So we sent out 5,000 individual invites. We invited 3,500 businesses, and we still struggled to get 6 or 7 business owners to turn up for the 2 Saturdays. And we had, of course, a business pop up after we launched the video saying this is what we're going to build, saying you didn't ask me. Well, we actually did ask you, you didn't bother to respond and turn up. So sometimes it has to be blunt and say, well, we did broadcast this, we did invite people, we could only take the views of the people that bothered to turn up and bothered to be informed. Particularly, sorry, I sound a bit aggressive, but the comments were made were very ill-informed. So he's saying, well, I'm happy to have an informed discussion with you about it, but you need to get informed first, and you haven't bothered to be informed. In terms of, so you do need to go broad in terms of your coverage, in terms of local councillors piping up later to champion a particular individual point of view, even though that organisation's been holding your hand the whole way through the process. It still stings. It doesn't sting, and it doesn't make the ministerial briefing issue let it go away. Look, if you can get as many informed and as many on board, you'll reduce your chances and I think reduce the impact of those individuals still having a go at usually the outcome.
Sam, I have to stop you. It's really rude, yeah. As a project manager, you'll appreciate the efficiency and the importance of finishing a project on time.
On the budget?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm so sorry to do that to you, but I kind of enjoyed it. Thank you everyone for coming. Evaluation is important, so I just want to actually do a bit of evaluating now. How many people thought this session was a complete and utter waste of time? Okay, we were 100% successful. So congratulations. Thank you very much for joining in, and great people to talk to about their experiences. So thank you very much. Amanda wants to say something.
Can I just say that if you actually want to use the beta, which is working, I believe, it's getting prettied up this week. If you're really wanting to, I know some of you want to use it on projects, we've renamed it and it's now evaluation-hub.com.
Evaluation-hub.
aviation-hub.com.
Get in touch with Amanda, she'll give that to you. And yeah, thanks very much for the offer. Okay, have fun. Thank you, panel. Give the panel a clap.